Victor Chan was a respected CEO with a flawless public image. Ivy Leung was a 24-year-old dreamer, searching for love and success in Hong Kong's glittering nightlife. Their secret affair began with whispered promises and stolen moments, but ended with a body in a suitcase floating in Victoria Harbor. What drove a powerful executive to risk everything for a hidden romance? And how did a young woman's trust turn into a deadly trap? This is the true story of obsession, betrayal, and a murder that shocked an entire city. Victor Chan lived a life that many envied. At 48, he had everything: wealth, status, and a picture-perfect family. As the CEO of a thriving tech conglomerate in Hong Kong, his days were packed with board meetings, investor calls, and public appearances. He was respected in corporate circles, admired for his sharp intellect and ability to close impossible deals. His wife, Elaine, a former news anchor, added polish to his public image. Together they were often featured in magazines and charity galas, their smiles hiding what lay beneath the surface. Behind the success and glamour, Victor was restless. His marriage, once full of passion and partnership, had become mechanical. Conversations with Elaine revolved around schedules and charity events. He felt suffocated in a home that looked like a hotel suite, cold and calculated. The more successful he became, the more isolated he felt. That isolation led him to make a decision that would destroy everything he had built. It started one rainy evening in Central. Victor ducked into an upscale lounge after a late dinner with clients. The place was quiet, moody, lit with soft gold lighting. That's where he first saw her, Ivy Leung. She was working behind the bar, her youth and confidence catching his eye immediately. She wasn't like the women he usually met. She was playful but sharp, ambitious but not yet jaded. She served him a drink, smiled, and walked away, but something about her stuck with him. He returned the next night, then again the night after that. Soon, Victor found excuses to be in Central more often. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on dreams, fears, and eventually desires. Ivy had grown up in Kowloon, had bounced between modeling gigs and service jobs, and dreamed of owning her own fashion brand. She saw Victor not just as a powerful man, but as someone who genuinely listened to her. He felt needed, seen, alive. Within a month, the affair had begun. At first, it was small things: late-night drives, dinners in private rooms, gifts slipped into her hands. Then it escalated. Victor leased a luxury apartment in Sai Ying Pun under a fake name, where Ivy could stay away from prying eyes. He told her it was temporary, that things at home were complicated, but he was working on it. She believed him. As the months passed, Ivy's feelings deepened. She started talking about a future together. Victor, trapped in the fantasy, made vague promises he had no intention of keeping. Still, he found it harder and harder to walk away. The thrill of secrecy, the break from his daily responsibilities, the way Ivy made him feel, it became an addiction. What Victor didn't realize was how quickly control was slipping through his fingers. Ivy wasn't just another affair. She had her own hopes, her own needs, and she wasn't going to remain a secret forever. While he played the role of a successful husband and executive by day, by night he lived in a shadow world where love and power blurred, and every decision edged closer to disaster. The apartment in Sai Ying Pun became their private sanctuary, hidden in plain sight. Located in a discreet high-rise with minimal staff and tight security, it was perfect for what Victor needed: privacy and control. He paid the rent in cash through a shell company, using a false identity that couldn't be traced back to him. The unit was modern, sleek, and tastefully decorated with neutral tones. Ivy moved in within weeks of their affair turning serious. To her, it was a sign of commitment. To Victor, it was containment. He visited often, usually in the evenings after his supposed business dinners or late meetings. Sometimes he stayed the night, other times just an hour. The neighbors barely noticed him. In the building's quiet corridors and private elevators, they never suspected that the man in tailored suits and dark sunglasses was leading a secret life behind closed doors. But Ivy noticed everything. She had started changing. No longer just the carefree woman behind the bar, she became more focused, more emotionally attached. She began to treat the apartment as her own, stocking the kitchen with his favorite wine, decorating with small items that reminded her of him, even keeping a drawer of his clothes. Victor, at first flattered, didn't realize she had also begun keeping records. She took photos of them together, captured voicemails, screenshots of their chats, and even recorded some of their more intimate conversations. She said it was to remember him, but something deeper was growing, a need to protect herself. Her online presence subtly reflected the shift. Ivy, always active on social media, started posting cryptic captions, photos of expensive gifts, views from the apartment balcony, designer shoes with notes that read, "When secrets feel like promises." She never mentioned Victor's name, but the pattern was there for anyone observant enough to follow. One of those people was Elaine. Victor's wife had long suspected something was wrong. He had become more distracted, emotionally distant, and oddly generous in his guilt, sending flowers, booking sudden weekend getaways, even donating large sums to her favorite charities. But his affection felt like compensation, not love. Elaine began noticing inconsistencies: duplicated hotel charges, 2 phone bills, a missing credit card. She confronted him once, but Victor was skilled at deflection. Still, her instincts told her the truth was darker than he let on. Elaine hired a private investigator, a quiet professional known for discretion and results. The investigator began trailing Victor's movements, documenting visits to Sai Ying-pun and the mysterious woman living there. Within a few weeks, Elaine had dozens of photographs, timestamps, and even footage of the two entering the apartment together. Yet she never confronted him. Instead, she watched, listened, waited. All the while, Ivy remained unaware that her carefully guarded secret was slowly unraveling from both ends. Her world with Victor felt fragile, like glass waiting to crack. She believed love could shield them from reality. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that the walls were closing in. And in a city that never sleeps, secrets don't stay buried for long. The pressure was building, and Victor Chan was beginning to feel it. His company was entering a high-stakes acquisition deal with a major American firm, and every move he made was being scrutinized by lawyers, shareholders, and the media. The deal was worth billions, and the board expected perfection. Victor, once cool under pressure, was now irritable, short-tempered, and distracted. He spent long hours at the office, but not all of that time was work-related. Ivy was demanding more of him. More time, more money, more clarity about their future. Ivy had grown restless in the apartment. Her business dreams had not materialized, and her patience was wearing thin. She had sacrificed her job, her friends, and her public image to stay hidden for Victor, and all she had to show for it were unfulfilled promises. He kept telling her to wait, that soon everything would change. But the vague timelines and empty reassurances began to feel like lies. One night, Ivy gave him an ultimatum. She wanted something concrete, 500,000 Hong Kong dollars in shares in his company. She said it was to start her business, but her tone had changed. It was no longer a request, it was a threat. If Victor didn't deliver, she would go public. She had enough evidence, she said, to ruin him. Messages, recordings, photos. His perfect life would unravel in seconds. Victor panicked. The timing couldn't have been worse. The deal his company was negotiating required absolute discretion, and moral integrity. If the affair became public, not only would he lose the deal, but likely his position, his wealth, and his reputation. He had spent decades building his career, and now it was hanging by a thread held by a 24-year-old woman he thought he could control. Instead of giving Ivy what she wanted, Victor tried to sever all contact. He stopped visiting the apartment, he blocked her calls, and changed his phone number. He even sent a junior employee to handle the lease termination, telling the agency that the unit was no longer needed. But Ivy didn't leave. She stayed confused and furious, clinging to the belief that Victor was just overwhelmed, that he would come back to her. Days passed. Then, one evening, she called him from a different number. She left a message. "If you don't come here tonight, I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." That was the last time anyone heard from Ivy Luong. Her neighbors noticed that the lights in the apartment had been off for 2 nights. No one had seen her leave. The building's security footage from the night of the message showed a man entering the apartment after midnight, wearing a cap and mask. He stayed for nearly an hour. The next morning, he was gone. So was Ivy. At first, no one reported her missing. She had few close friends and was largely isolated. But behind the scenes, something had already shifted. Ivy's silence wasn't normal, and the next piece of the story would emerge not from the apartment, but from the harbor. 2 days after Ivy Luong was last seen, the stillness of Victoria Harbor was broken by a grisly discovery. A fisherman working near a dock in the early hours noticed a large suitcase floating awkwardly among the debris. At first he thought it was just luggage lost from a ferry or yacht, but something about the weight and the way it bobbed in the water made him suspicious. He called the marine police. When authorities opened the suitcase, what they found stunned even the most experienced officers. Inside were plastic-wrapped remains, carefully packed and secured with layers of duct tape. The body had been dismembered, arms, legs, and torso separated, but there was no visible trauma, no signs of a struggle. It was clear this was no random act of violence. It was precise, cold, and planned. The forensics team moved quickly. Within a day, the victim was identified as Ivy Luong through fingerprints and dental records. Her death was ruled a homicide, and toxicology reports showed traces of sedatives in her system. Investigators believed she had been drugged before being killed, possibly to prevent resistance. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of panic. She may never have known what was happening until it was too late. News of the murder spread fast, shaking Hong Kong's tightly knit circles of influence. Ivy was not a public figure, but her death, young, violent, and mysterious, captured headlines. At first, little was known about her life. But as police traced her past, her connection to Victor Chan surfaced almost immediately. Authorities examined Ivy's apartment in Sai Ying Pun and found it nearly untouched since the night she vanished. In the bedroom, they discovered a hidden compartment beneath a drawer, filled with a trove of personal materials. Photographs of Ivy with Victor, printed messages, receipts, and even USB drives containing voice memos and videos. Some of the footage clearly showed Victor inside the apartment, kissing her, giving her gifts, and talking about keeping things quiet. There was no denying the nature of their relationship. Security footage from the building added further clarity. On the night of her disappearance, a man closely matching Victor's build entered the apartment wearing dark clothes, a baseball cap, and a surgical mask. He carried a large duffel bag. An hour later, he exited, alone, and was seen dragging what looked like a heavy suitcase. Though the mask covered his face, the body language and timing were damning. Investigators cross-referenced his car's GPS, phone pings, and city surveillance. The trail led to the very harbor where Ivy's body was found. But the final blow to Victor's denials came from an unexpected source: his wife. Elaine Chan had been quietly building her own case. The day after Ivy's body was found, she walked into the police station with a flash drive containing private investigator reports, photos, and voice recordings. Everything pointed to Victor's double life, the affair, and his increasingly erratic behavior leading up to Ivy's death. She handed over everything with chilling calmness. Victor had no idea his wife had been watching all along. And now, the perfect life he'd spent years crafting was beginning to fall apart, one secret at a time. Victor Chan was arrested in the middle of a board meeting. He had just finished presenting quarterly projections when plainclothes officers entered the room. There was no scene, no struggle, only the quiet shock of his colleagues as he was led away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed outside the building, capturing the downfall of one of Hong Kong's most admired executives. News of the arrest spread like wildfire, and the details of his affair with Ivy Leung became public knowledge within hours. At the police station, Victor maintained his innocence. He claimed he had ended the relationship with Ivy weeks before her death, insisting she had been unstable and manipulative. He painted himself as a victim of extortion, describing her as obsessed and threatening. But the evidence told another story, one filled with preparation, deception, and intent. The prosecution laid out a meticulous timeline. They showed surveillance footage of Victor purchasing a suitcase similar to the one found in Victoria Harbor. They presented internet search records from his office computer, queries about sedatives, body decomposition, and cleaning chemicals. His phone log showed a sudden stop in communication with Ivy the day she disappeared, along with location data placing him near the apartment and later near the harbor. Ivy's collected materials, photos, voice messages, and handwritten notes added emotional weight to the cold facts. One recording captured her saying she feared Victor would erase her if she pushed him too hard. Another showed Victor promising to handle everything soon, just days before her death. Together, these formed a narrative of control, desperation, and a man who believed he could silence a problem to save his image. Elaine testified during the trial. Calm and composed, she described her growing suspicions, her decision to hire a private investigator, and the months she spent collecting evidence. Her presence in court drew media attention, not only because of her past as a public figure, but for her poise amid betrayal. When asked why she waited to come forward, she replied, "Because I needed to be sure, and because I knew no one would believe it until the truth was complete." The trial lasted 6 weeks. The defense argued Ivy's death could have been an accident or the result of another relationship gone wrong. But with no alternative suspects, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and Victor's own careless digital footprint, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of murder. Victor Chan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His company removed his name from all official documents and the acquisition deal collapsed. Elaine filed for divorce the same day the verdict was announced. A final twist emerged weeks after the trial. Ivy's social media accounts, long dormant, suddenly posted a scheduled message, one she had programmed herself. The caption read, "If you're seeing this, something has happened to me. Look at Victor Chan." The post went viral, cementing Ivy's story in the public consciousness. What began as a hidden affair ended in cold-blooded murder and exposed the darkness that can lie behind the most polished faces.